Hey guys, Chris from Hockey Tutorial here, and today in this video we're going to be taking a look at, or you could say revisiting, the subject of skate blade profiling. And before we jump into the video for fun, comment down below and let me know your weight and what depth hollow you're using, so what type of sharpen do you get. And if you have had your blades profiled before, comment down below and let me know what profile you're currently using and why. Now, a few years back we did a video on this, but if you've been keeping your ear to the ground in the hockey world, you've been seeing some of the acquisitions that have been taking place, you'll know that profiling is something that's going to be a lot more present in the upcoming seasons. So I thought it'd be a good idea to kind of give a little bit more context about what profiling actually is, how it benefits different players, but more importantly I wanted to give Tommy, because he's never had a chance to try profiled runners, the chance to try 4 different sets of profiled runners to see what the different feels are in just one session. A literal first impression of what 4 different profiles feel like and how they differ from skate sharpening. Now, if we're to very quickly discuss the difference between skate sharpening and profiling, with the example of this incredibly flash blade I've got from Blade Tech, more info on this blade will be released in a separate video because it's not just a cool color, there's a lot to it, but that's a completely separate video. Now, when you look at a hockey skate blade, when you get it sharpened, if we turn it over this way so the toe's facing you guys, the bottom of the blade that comes into contact with the ice is what's altered, and the shape of that is essentially in an upside down U shape. And every time you get your skates sharpened, what you're doing is essentially changing the depth of that upside down U. You're either increasing the depth, which would mean a sharper, you could say sharper grind, which would essentially give you better grip but less glide. And if you reduce the depth of the hollow or the upside down U on the bottom of the skate blade, that gives you more glide and less bite. But essentially when you get your skates sharpened, that's what you're changing. So an example of a skate grind or skate sharpen that would be quite deep would be like a 3/8, and one that would be quite shallow would be something like a 5/8. So it really does depend on what you prefer as a player. But now how that completely differs from blade profiling is if we look at your standard hockey blade over here, when you get your skates profiled, what you're doing is essentially adding different curvatures to the blade in different sections of the blade, which is completely different from skate sharpening. And having this alteration done to your blade can have loads of different effects. You can essentially increase the contact you have with the ice. You can change the pitch of the blade so you're more over your toes or more over your heels. It really depends on what type of a skater you are, perhaps what position you play, the style of skater you are. All of these things can be essentially tweaked and adjusted through profiling to make your experience on the ice incredibly better than what you would expect or what you would get from simply getting your skate blades sharpened. And some of the things you can also do with profiling, aside from altering the pitch of the blade, is to, in a neutral position, put you in more contact with the ice, increasing your stability. There's lots of different advantages to different profiles for different players, depending on which one you select. Now, I think where profiling gets very complicated for a lot of players is all of the different numbers involved with profiling. 6 foot, 9 foot, 12 foot, what does all of this mean? If we're to look at one of 4 of the profiles that we're going to be featuring in this video, 2 from CAG, 2 from ProSharp, the one I wanted to talk about first is going to be the quad profile from ProSharp. Now, this consists of 4 numbers, 6, 9, 11, and 13. What does that mean? Now, the best way I can explain it, and I can't take credit for this analogy, this comes from the guys over at Blade Tech, so hopefully I'm going to be doing it justice. The best way that I can explain these numbers is to think of them as different sized pizzas: 6, 9, 11, and 13. Now, of course, as you look at the numbers, they're getting bigger. The profile starts from the front of the blade and works its way to the back of the blade, just to give you a little bit of insight into which direction we're going from on the actual skate blade. So 6 is going to be closer to the toe, 13 is going to be closer to the heel of the blade. Now, if these different numbers are different sized pizzas, we'll represent that as different circles. When you're looking at the quad profile from ProSharp, you're essentially taking a section of each of these different pizzas, and that's what you're using to essentially create the shape of the blade that is being profiled when you refer to the quad profile from ProSharp. The way you can think of it is this particular profile features a lot of curvy sections because there's a lot of small numbers in there, and there's 4 of them. This particular profile will result in the player experiencing a lot more bite on the ice and a lot more maneuverability. Now, when we look at profiles that have either less numbers or larger numbers, what you are effectively getting there is a larger pizza. So if we look at the superior profile from ProSharp, that features the numbers 6, 12, and 20. So with this particular profile, you can expect to have more glide and more stability because it's not as curvy as the previous profile, and the numbers, especially when you get to the rear section of the blade, are much larger. So small numbers with the profile will equal more bite and maneuverability. Larger numbers will equal more stability and more glide. And this effectively breaks down to the size of these pizzas or the different zones that are profiled on the particular blade. If the circumference of the circle is much larger, that means the curve on the blade is going to be much flatter, giving you more stability and more glide. If the circle is a little bit smaller, so it's a smaller number circle or a smaller diameter circle, it's going to be a lot curvier of a section, which is going to give you more maneuverability and more bite. It's also important to mention that the more zones a profile has, or more blade sections and blade curvatures it has, doesn't necessarily make it better than one that only has one. It really comes down to what the skating style of that particular player is, what they prefer on the ice, what conditions they're used to skating in. All of these things are going to affect which profile is going to be the best for a particular player to use over another. But it's important to mention, exactly like blade sharpening, one sharpen isn't better than another. It depends on the ice conditions, the build of the player, what they prefer to skate with, and it's the exact same thing with profiling. It's all about preference and what helps you to skate to the best of your ability on the ice. Now, I feel like one of the most overlooked benefits of profiling skate blades, even if you're not bothered about increasing your glide, increasing your bite, any of that jargon, but one of the most overlooked benefits is the fact that it allows you to drop down in the depth of sharpen that you get on your skate blades. Something that I've noticed, especially going to tournaments and playing in scrimmages with players from all over the world, is that a lot of players are using sharpens that are way too deep for what they actually need. I think some players have become accustomed to walking into a pro shop or an arena and asking for whatever the standard sharpen is, which, if you know a little bit about sharpening, there is no standard, it doesn't exist. It might just be particularly one sharpen is used by a lot of the players over another one, and this might not be because it's the best option. It might be because that particular person that sharpens skates doesn't want to change the grinding wheel and offer players a almost like endless option of different sharpens they can have on their skate blades, so they've reduced it to maybe one or two depending on where you're skating. This is something that I've seen a lot at different arenas, so it's definitely worth mentioning this, because I feel like being able to reduce your sharpen isn't really something that is, it's not a negative. The way that you're actually meant to figure out what sharpen you're meant to be using is based on your build and the ice conditions, and of course personal preference. If you're a very big and heavy player skating on ice that is very soft and you use a very deep grind, again like a 3/8 for example, that's far too deep for your build and also the ice conditions that you're on. Because you're on softer ice, your blades are naturally going to dig deeper into the ice because it's softer. And also because you are a big, heavy built player, you're going to be digging way deeper into the ice than you actually need to have good bite and good turning on the ice. And what you can have if you marry up the right profile with the right blade sharpen is you can still have a great level of ice contact or more ice contact, which gives you the feeling, or you could also say the illusion, of having sharper skates. Because more of the blade is in contact with the ice, it means that you're able to turn aggressively, turn and maneuver the way that you would with a deep sharpen, but you'd be able to do the exact same thing with a shallower grind. Just because your blade has been profiled, it has better ice contact, so you don't have to go for a deeper sharpen, which means your legs are going to be working twice as hard when you're striding, when you're turning, when you're trying to start and stop. Your edges are digging in deeper into the ice, which means you're going to be expelling a lot more energy than you need to. So by going for the right profile, increasing your ice contact, and then dropping down in a sharpen, your legs are going to be working a lot less. You're going to have more energy throughout the shifts that you're playing, and you're just going to be a better performing player, all through getting your skates profiled. I feel like this is one of the biggest things that's neglected when people are discussing profiling. There's a lot of benefits, but for me, I think this is the number one. So for example, with myself using a quad profile from Pro Sharp, what I'm able to do is move from a 3/8 sharpen to a 5/8, which isn't anywhere near as deep, which means more of my blades are sitting on the surface of the ice. But because I've gone for a quad profile from Pro Sharp, more of my blade is in contact with the ice than it would be if I just had a standard set of blades from, for example, one of the skate manufacturers, with them being unprofiled and maybe only having one zone on the blade. A pretty cool test that you can do with your skate blades if you're at home is to remove them from your skates and stand them up onto a table, a very flat surface, just on their own, and get 2 pieces of thin paper, preferably a color that is very obvious to see against the surface that the skate blade is sitting on. and just slide them very carefully underneath the skate blades. And the second you feel a bit of resistance, stop moving the paper underneath the skate blades. And that will be essentially showing you the contact patch that your skate blades have with the ice surface when you're standing in a neutral position. And if I'm to do this exact same test with a few of the different blade profiles that I have, you can see how different the contact patch is. And bear in mind, these are very, very tiny blades. It's 1/10 of an inch of steel is what we're standing on the ice while we're playing hockey. And if you're able to increase your blade contact by even a few millimeters, it's something that you will feel a ton of difference of when you step out onto the ice. You're turning, you're stopping, quick starts and stops, striding, all of these different movements that you make on the ice, especially pivoting, going backwards, you're going to feel a difference if you have a different point of contact with the ice, or you've increased the ice contact with the blade or decreased it. I can't stress enough how much of a difference there is, and hopefully when we run the tests with Tommy, you'll be able to hear his first impressions. Now bear in mind, these are first impressions. This isn't a test that we've carried out after he's played scrimmages, sessions, games. This is just so you can see how immediate the effects are of trying profiled blades. But more importantly, it's important for me to mention that all 4 sets of these profiled steel that we have from Blade Tech all have the exact same grind. It's just the profile that's changed, not the grind. And also quickly touching on the 2 profiles from CAG that we have. Now, when we break down the way these different profiles look, unlike Pro Sharp, CAG just have one profiled zone. That one is going to have a much flatter profile. You could think of it as the pizza size on the 25 is smaller than the one on the 45. So that means the 45 is going to have a lot more ice contact, it's going to have a lot more glide, and it's going to give the feeling of having less bite on the ice, even though all of the runners have the exact same profile. Now quickly just making sense of the numbers that we see on CAG's profiles. When we look at the gold runners, we see 45-60. What this essentially means is that the 60 accounts for the total area of flatness on this profile, or this blade, which is 60 millimeters. The 45 number, essentially what that means is if you look at the highlighted area on the blade where we show you roughly where the profile is, we add a center line to that profile. What the 45 number means is in front of that center line, you have 45 millimeters of flatness. Behind the center line, you have 15 millimeters of flatness. And just like the other CAG profile we looked at, when we look at the CAG profile that has 25-40, the 40 accounts for the total area of flatness in millimeters for this particular profile. 25 of that is going to be in front of the center line that we show you towards the toe area of the blade. And the area behind the center line is going to have 15 millimeters of flatness, and that's towards the heel of the blade. And when we look at the shape of the profiles that we get from Pro Sharp, which was the Superior and also the Quad, the Superior has 3 different zones. We have the 6 at the front, the 12 in the middle, and the 20 at the back, which means it's going to be a lot flatter than the Quad profile, which has more zones and more curves to it. The Quad has the 6 at the front, the 9, the 11, and then the 13. So this one has a lot more curves to it. So like we said, it's going to have a lot more bite and a lot more maneuverability than, for example, the Superior Sharpen, which only has 3 different zones. And as a side note, of course, we know that not everyone has the ability to buy 4 different sets of runners with different profiles for you to try. But Blade Tech have a very cool feature on their website, which is called their profile assessment tool, which will essentially ask you a series of questions, and then it'll help you to better identify which profile will be best for you to try on the blades that you order from Blade Tech. Another question I wanted to definitely touch on in this video is, how long does profiling last? Over the years, I've had a lot of different contrasting answers, which has been from every 6 times you get your blades sharpened, you have to get them reprofiled. But over the years, I've kind of learned that this can be essentially a way of getting you to spend more money than you need to on profiling your skate blades. Provided you're getting your skates sharpened by somebody that knows what they're doing, or hopefully by the Sparks machine, which means that it's applying the same amount of pressure and force every single time it sharpens your skate blades, the answer to how long will your profiled runners stay profiled is indefinitely. If you've got an automated sharpener, especially like the Sparks, that will actually help to maintain your profile so you don't have to worry about having your skate blades profiled again, because all of the different grooves and curves that the blade has that represent each of the different profiles, the Sparks machine will be applying the exact same amount of even pressure as it goes along all of these different profiles, essentially maintaining them as you're getting your skates sharpened. So if you've been wondering about how long they'll last, I thought I'd answer that in this video. And on the notion of blade contact, it's also important to mention the Flex Force technology in Bladex runners will also naturally increase blade contact time. So because of that blade being able to flex into the holder and then flex out, it's increasing the contact time that you have with the ice and the blade, which is also going to be benefiting your performance on the ice. So that's a very subtle one, but it's definitely one worth mentioning. And if you want more information on how the Flex Force technology works in Bladex runners, I'll link a video down below in the video description so you can check that out. Now let's hand over to Tommy and see his experience on the ice, see what he thinks about these different profiles, which ones he loves, which ones he hates.
The first pair of blades that I used today were the Quad Zeros. They felt really nice. They were biting into the ice nicely. I felt like a tight turn, stop, and quick start like I would in a normal game. Out of the four that I used, they felt the best to me. They just fitted my game nicely. They worked well for me. So out of the four, if I had to pick, they'd probably be the ones I'd put in my skates. Blade 2. Well, I didn't really feel any different. They felt like they were a bit blunt in like the middle of my skate. Chris tells me I was skating a little bit funky. They felt blunt. They didn't feel like they were pulling me anywhere or whatnot. They just felt blunt in the middle of my skate. So like, you know, tight turns, crossovers, they felt a bit weird, and especially I done one sprint start and then stop and come the other way. The stop was very weird. I didn't have a middle on my blade, so it's kind of hard to stop and then go again. But that was the only difference with blades number 2. Next pair of blades that I used were the gold pair of blades. Very flashy, looked very nice, but unfortunately for me, did not feel very nice. They felt very weird. I just didn't feel like I had control over my feet. I felt like my skates were controlling me instead of me controlling my skates. There was more blade on the ice than what I'm used to on my everyday blades. So the reason, or Chris has explained to me, the reason that it felt like it was pulling me back on my heels is because there was more of the blade on the ice. That just doesn't work for me. That might work for someone else, that might work for you. It sort of depends on your style of play. So don't take this and think, oh, the others are rubbish, I need to go with the Quad Zeros. That's just from my style of play. It might be very different for you. So the last pair, I actually stepped on the ice after getting them put in my skates, and I looked at Chris and went, Chris, where's my toe? I felt like half of my blade was missing. I didn't have the toe on my skate. And my style of play, I skate on my toe quite a lot. I like to lean forward and, you know, sprint start on my toes. So me not feeling like I didn't have a toe on my blade is a big issue for my style of play. I honestly felt like I had hydraulics on my skates. It was strange, to put it that way. If I had to rank them, obviously the Quad Zeros, number 1, they felt like I could use them in, you know, a league game. So they're probably the best for my style of play. This ranking is for the way I play. Obviously, it might be different for how you are. The second pair I'd probably put, the second pair I used would be the second on my list. And then the gold and the last ones, they're about even.
So basically the same order you skated in them is the same order you ran in?
Yes, the order I skated in them is the order I put them in, 100%.
As always, guys, a big thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. Hopefully we've answered all of your questions that you had about blade profiling, the difference that has with skate sharpening. If you have any questions, leave them down below in the comment section. And as always, guys, make sure you thumbs up and subscribe so you can stay up to date with all of the videos that we post, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.